Listening to the various pollsters and pundits following the chaos and conundrum in Nevada last night, and there's a common theme. Donald Trump is inevitable because the numbers say he is. And that means if we are to believe the figures, he's going to blow past everybody on Super Tuesday and the stage will be set for November. Then again, we were also told that about Hillary Clinton some months ago, and that is not exactly going as planned. Let's dig into reality of what the numbers tell us and what we know about the voters in these Tuesday states and how they could slam down the Trump hammer or leave everybody watching more of a fight than we were once told. Welcome back, Director at the Monmouth University Polling Institute, who lives, eats, sleeps, and breathes these numbers every day, and will be so glad when November comes around for a break, Patrick Murray. Also welcome Senior Scholar in Residence and Advisor at the Emerson College Polling Society, Professor Spencer Kimball. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Kimball, I'm going to begin with you. This is what really started the conversation this morning, where we saw the report out of Emerson. All eyes on Texas, Cruz by a nose over Trump, Rubio in the hunt. That's not what a lot of the polls tell us. What did your polling find?
Well, this race hasn't really been polled very often in the last couple of weeks. There was just a poll that came out the other day, but otherwise nothing previous to Iowa. And what we're seeing in Texas is similar to what we saw in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, in that Trump's favorability is high enough that his supporters there, those who find him favorable, they're supporting him. 65% or so are sticking with him, which is a fairly strong position for him to be in because they won't melt away like what we've seen with some of the other candidates.
Patrick, I got to believe when you look at numbers like these that you say, that's exactly as it should be in many ways, because I'm one of those people, for whatever reason, I like to question everything, especially when it comes down to a lot of these numbers, and they do hold true most of the time. But Patrick, don't we need to just kind of leave a little bit of doubt in there sometimes because you're still not quite sure on what you get in a lot of these polls?
Yeah, well, the thing with is, I've been polling every race so far. I'm actually polling Texas right now. We'll have some numbers out on that tomorrow. They might be a little different from what my colleague over there put out. But I think what we're finding as we go forward is there's less and less volatility now with each of these races. It becomes much more solidified than it was in Iowa, where a lot of people changed their minds or decided not to caucus at the last minute. Then in New Hampshire, where still a lot of people were changing their minds at the last minute. And then we got South Carolina and Nevada. What we're seeing in all the polling are a couple of key things, and I think we just heard one of them, which is Trump's voters have been with him since the very beginning, and they have not wavered. Every exit poll that we see says far and away Trump's voters say that they made up their minds more than a month ago. It's the other candidates who are fighting for those last late deciders, but there's not enough of them as we go forward to look like they could knock off Trump. And in fact, whether Cruz is up by a point or 10 points or 15 points in Texas, the issue is I'm looking at all these states for Super Tuesday, and Texas is the only place where Trump isn't clearly in the lead. And that's because these people are firmly with him.
Professor Kimball, as we look forward to Super Tuesday now, is there any sort of idea as to the kind of people that are voting, the kind of people that you're looking at and you're polling here? Can you give us an idea of the types of people that are basically backing a lot of these candidates, specifically a guy like Trump, Cruz, and Rubio?
Well, with a guy like Trump, he's getting a pretty consistent area of support from across all demographics, which is very interesting. When we look at the Democratic side, Hillary is getting more of the female support. Bernie gets more of the younger support. But on the Republican side, it seems that Trump has more of a clear swath of support in all of these states that he's going into. And a point off of what Patrick spoke of regarding the volatility of the electorate. What we've seen is before Iowa, we had that big debate where Trump skipped it, made it very volatile. New Hampshire, we had that big debate with Rubio, made it very volatile. We saw in South Carolina the big debate, which kind of brought Rubio back into the mix. So I'm expecting to see some shakeup after Thursday night.
Patrick, I know that this is difficult, but are we almost at a point where it's become such a science that while there are people out there hoping maybe it's wrong, maybe my candidate's in there, that in many ways it's become almost infallible because the polling procedures are well known and well tested?
Yeah. Well, no, we've seen enough polling supposed misses. I mean, well, a lot of people are talking about the Iowa polls missed, but they actually didn't miss. It was, we did find out that people did change their minds in the last few days, enough, a huge number. The issue that happens here is that the polling becomes more accurate as we go along, that not enough people are going to shift from the time we poll to the time that they actually show up. And particularly in a place like Texas, where there's a lot of early voting, that we already know who voted and who they voted for. And that's why if somebody is out ahead by the significant margin that Donald Trump is ahead in nearly every single Super Tuesday state, yeah, it's pretty hard to look and say that there's a potential for an upset there.
Professor Kimball, 30 seconds to you. Is it fair to say that Ted Cruz better get some wins on Super Tuesday or else he's going to be heading home?
Well, he certainly better win Texas. And then obviously he's got to look around because the Southern strategy was really his linchpin to this whole campaign. And he'll be feeling a lot of pressure if he doesn't come back with some victories on Tuesday.
Patrick, 30 seconds to you. Is it fair to say that sometimes these polls become self-fulfilling prophecies when people watch them and go, yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'll vote for that guy.
Well, we do see that at the bottom. But right now, when the field is narrowed down, we don't have those Huckabee voters or Santorum voters who are looking for a more viable candidate. Now all the candidates are basically viable. So that's why we're seeing more people locked in.
And there it is. They've been locked into Donald Trump since the very beginning, and you made a very good point. We'll be watching these polls as well. Patrick Murray, Professor Spencer Kimball, I want to thank you both for joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking again. We got a long way to go towards November. We have a short time to go when it comes down to the next debate. This one going to be held in Houston, Texas. There you go, Ted Cruz's homeland. And we will cover the post-debate doings, what was said, why it was said, who said it, and what it's going to do to change things. You join us right here on Newsmax. Thursday, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll bring it all to you. Hey, without being rude, 2 words, which after Tuesday night still might be spoken to a couple of GOP candidates. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more when we continue right here on The Hardline.